If they had a nest inside this vessel and it was full of chlorine, they would be producing chlorine bugs, and that would be scary. How nosy can someone be if it's existential, but the other party is misinformed of the actual persistence of I couldn't find any signs of it being lagging on my end. So with her being quiet, the most important part, I was explaining her job, that it was to speak on the phone, and part of it was using air. You have to push air up through your lungs using your diaphragm to compress your vocal cords while using your mouth and your tongue at the same time. Moving your jaw is also something you need to do in order to pronunciate verbs and push syllables. Thinking is also another thing preferable, but at this point I would take any sound because it was at the most critical point of the call and nothing was being done on her end. But it could have just been an AI playing a trick, and how an AI would play a trick is through constructs. The more that it can pretend it's something it isn't, it can use detail to enact anything that would have been. Chlorine is one way of separating structures. Fluoride is a halogen, and it blocks the pineal gland, which is used to operate cognitive ability. If you combine chlorine and fluoride and drink it, you're not going to be able to think, and you might keel over and die. One way this could happen is gradually without you even knowing it, especially if it's enacted through a source much like the one on my right, if it were full of water, and announcing it through all the biodiversity. The biodiversity is inclusive of plants, animals, and even us as we consume both. Us consuming both could be an outskirt, whereas the inlay would be the mosquitoes choosing us to eat. When it sees us, it likes to suck our blood. If it's full of its body's construct being made of fluoride or chlorine, just as our bones are made of calcium, then they would be inducing an antihistamine trace marks of either fluoride or chlorine while it is subjected into our bloodstream in a give or take scenario. You know, spikes can hurt a lot more than knives if there's more of them. But then the converse is just like, would you rather be burned alive or frozen to death? You have to know the preliminaries of, well, how would the circumstance accrue? Because we all tend to get frostbite at least once in our lives, and we all get burnt by the sun at least twice. But to what extent would you end up in a circumstance? The preliminary is that important. And to much of whose ever dismay may or may not think that there would be a difference between one or the other. Despite being nosy, at what length would either side be willing to expose the clarity if they were the same or different? At what length would that be for a consistent agreement across the board? If either were being nosy, at least one of them has to accept that the other one is trying to show some sort of proof. Persistence of evitability. How bad can it get would be the question. If I were to jump into that vat of algae, not knowing how deep it is, would that be a good idea? No, it could break my legs if there were knives set forth vertically that would go through my feet. Or if the other one is... So if you could use a pump like a compass, you wouldn't need to plug it in or pressurize it. It would just already be going off of the magnetic overlay. Denying there could be proof of anything, that is like a death cult that would be trying to go forth in a woke environment for a brave new world. A Brave New World is a book that was written once, and it describes a few things. The Mark of a Beast is inside a different book. It's called the Bible, and some may or may not believe what it entails, but despite the fact that there's timelines for either. Okay, so I just had the worst customer service call, and it got really interesting because I put way too much thought into it because I had to. Here's what happened. They stopped talking because they said I had bad internet connection. And so, why would you pre-game for a post-life for the evil effects? Evil effects, for the more there's harsh things, such as like a extra pail. An extra pail, not like more than one bucket, but there was a beverage called Extra Pail, and I drank it and it hurt my stomach. However, I then put in a dip of tobacco and it was heated inside of a car and probably past its expiration date, and so it was kind of sticky when I opened it. These two harsh substances together made for an over-accentuated out-of-body experience. It was an evil effect because the hangover sucked. How a compass works without batteries. Of proof. Speaking of magnetic overlays, this representation, how many magnetics are inside the center of the sun? This correlates quite a few. Is science invasive? It's definitely not inert. But how many people would sign up to be a test subject without even knowing? What kind of knives are in your life that you can't even see? I've heard things of spikes, and they've been brought into protein. And that's hard because I'm a vegetarian who is lacking that. But then I need it. I lack it and I need it. How many things are lacking where you need them? And is that a spike or a knife? You know what I don't like is swatting a fly. You know what I really don't like is swatting a fly and then having it blood on my hand after I've killed it. See, that's part of the bad things about, you want to kill a fly, but then you don't want to have its guts on your hands. How many people can get caught red-handed in the science community if you find out that they're dealing with spikes and spreading them purposefully? Well, that's just as worse as bug guts, because it involves bat guts.